So I'm Senator Laura Thielen. Welcome to our Town Hall community meeting tonight. I have all of us here from the representatives and senators from the district, Senator Sam Slom, Representative Jean Ward, and Representative Mark Hashem. What we're going to do is each of us is just going to speak for 5 minutes, give an update, whatever each of us wants to say, and then we'll do a Q&A. Because Olelo is here, when we take questions from you, we'll repeat them so people who are later on watching on Olelo can understand what the question is, and then we'll figure out which one of us would answer it. And then after the Q&A, we'll take a break, so, and we'll end the formal presentation, but then we'll be available for one-on-one conversations. So if there's some things that you want to talk to us about that you didn't have a chance to during the Q&A or you just didn't want to raise in front of everybody else, we'll be available. Now, obviously, we didn't prepare for this. Does anybody want to go first?
Sam wants to go first.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm fine. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, you're already there.
You're there.
Okay.
We vote for Laura.
Then we get to that. We're not done.
Okay, it's nice to have everyone behind you. Okay. Last year, when we held the town hall meetings, I came here and I talked about a whole list of bills that were on the bills that I was working on. But I thought I'd try something different this year, because sometimes the legislature can be a little overwhelming. There's just so many bills going on, and also sometimes people get a little bit cynical about, how the legislature works and why certain decisions are made. So I thought what I'd do tonight is share with you about one bill that I'm going to be voting on tomorrow, and the work that I've been doing on this bill up until now, just to see if that gives you a little bit more insight into the legislative process and what we do. Before I talk about the bill, though, I want to give a little background. Many of you know that Hawaii is trying to increase the amount of renewable energy that we produce on our island. Our state is more reliant on fossil fuels than any other state in the nation. And so there is a state policy and goal to increase the amount of energy that we produce from renewable resources here, to lessen our reliance on fossil fuels and have hopefully less expensive energy production for everybody. But our state also has a policy to increase local production of agricultural food. And we actually have a constitutional amendment that was passed back in 1978 that says our state is obligated to ensure that we maintain agricultural production and a future for agriculture in Hawaii. And part of that is by maintaining agricultural lands for agricultural use. So kind of in this whole competing, philosophies, we're dealing with a bill right now, and it's Senate Bill 2658. And under this bill, what it says is, should we change our state land use code? Right now, we have certain lands that have been classified as having the best soils for growing crops, Class A lands and Class B lands. You are not allowed to put solar production facilities on these lands. You can maybe put in, I think they gave a 10% allowance of solar production facilities on Class B lands because they want to keep the lands open for agricultural production. And what we have in front of us is a bill that's saying we should open up Class B lands for solar energy production. And this is a bill that I've been wrestling with because I believe that if we're going to have a future for agriculture, we have to keep our best soil lands open and available for agriculture. And what the people coming in supporting this bill are saying is, allow us to do compatible uses. So we'll do solar facilities and agriculture on these lands. And what they pointed to is in places like Europe, where they'll have solar production facilities with sheep grazing in between the solar panels. As we've gone through the hearings, though, I've been pressing the people proposing for this bill and saying, what guarantee do we have that you are going to actually put agricultural uses on this land? So can we come up with some amendments in the bill that are going to assure us that we'll have agriculture here in addition to solar? And I want to show you a map. Most of the food that is grown and eaten locally is grown on the island of Oahu. About 80% of our local grown food is grown on this island. We have our largest farms here and our most experienced farmers. This map shows you how many parcels that are Class B lands that we have that are 100 acres or greater on our island. And I picked 100 acres because if we're going to do agricultural production on a commercial scale, you need fairly large parcels. We only have 21 parcels on the island of Oahu of Class B lands that are 100 acres or greater. So if we take 2 of them out of production for solar, and we don't have any guarantee that there's going to be shared agricultural use, we'll only have 19 parcels left of this B land that's large enough to be commercial agricultural scale. So I've been doing a lot of work on research like this and talking with the attorney generals about what kind of amendments we could have, and also talking to the people that are pushing for this change because they want to do renewable energy production, which is not a bad thing. And what I've been wrestling with as a legislator is it better to, if a bill looks like it's going forward, to accept that reality and come up with amendments that make it as best as it can be, even though we may lose some of this land for agricultural production, put in amendments that guarantee that there's some type of agricultural production, and put some consequences in place if they don't do agricultural production? Or is it better to just say, no, you can't do this because we don't have enough land left for agricultural production, and even though renewable energy is a really good goal, you're going to have to find someplace else to do it, and they may not be able to. I don't really have an answer for you, but I thought it was just an example to share with you that there is a lot of work that goes on in the legislature that I never saw before I was in there, and maybe you weren't aware of, where later on, if a bill comes out, some of the assumptions may be, oh, people were in the pockets of the developers, or they made these decisions. But we're dealing with, hundreds of bills that are dealing with lots of topics like this, with a lot of people who have very passionate opinions on it. And we have a number of legislators that, support things that I don't support, or I support things that they don't support. And in this mix of discussion, what comes out at the end of the day is about 200 bills or so that make it into law. We're going to be voting on the bill tomorrow, and I can tell you the tack that I'm taking with this bill, because it seems to me like it is going to at least move forward to the second half of session, is to try and get a couple amendments in that provide that as much of a guarantee as we can of having agricultural use and some consequence to the solar energy production if they don't put shared agricultural use in it. I don't know if that's the right decision to take. I'd be interested in hearing back from you folks later in the one-on-one session or in the Q&A. But that's basically what I wanted to share tonight, so thank you for your attention.
Okay. Aloha, everyone. I'm Sam Slom. I am the sole Republican in the state Senate. I'm the minority leader, so wherever I go to a meeting, I always bring 100% of participation with me. And I serve on all 16 Senate committees, so that keeps me out of most of the trouble. Just to bring you up to date, the legislative session started January 15th. It goes until May 1st. We're just completing today a 5-day mandatory recess, which means that we don't go out and play on the monkey bars. We have hearings, we just don't have floor sessions, but we resume the floor sessions tomorrow. We have already completed 22 days, or more than 1/3 of the session, and unhappily I report to you we haven't passed anything and are not likely to pass anything that's going to empower you more, to give you more choices, or to reduce the high cost of living that all of us suffer through here in Hawaii. And that really is our mission. That's what we should be doing. But we're not doing it. Instead, we get diverted to land development deals and energy deals and these deals and those deals. Let me answer the question that Senator Thielen, and let me first of all thank Senator Thielen and her staff for actually putting together this town meeting, and thanking you for taking time out. We know how busy you are and how many things you have to do, so we appreciate you taking time to come. But let me answer the question of what do you do when there are parts of a bill that may be good, or the intent may be good, but the performance and the details are not so good. Well, I like to avoid the rush. And I vote no early. And I vote no often. And in fact, if I weren't in the state Senate, there would be very, very, very few no votes. Everything would go a lot faster and a lot smoother because everybody would be in agreement. But even though my colleagues will tell me privately that they disagree with some of the things, they are very reluctant to vote no because the way the system is and the process is. And almost everybody in the Senate has a chairmanship of a committee. And a chairman doesn't like to vote against another chairman for fear of maybe retaliation or something might happen. I'm in a unique position. Since last year, I am the vice chairman of the Economic Development Committee. And that's the first time that a Republican has held a position of leadership, chairman or vice chairman, in 24 years. And when I was approached by Donovan Dela Cruz to be the vice chairman of that committee, I said, look, I don't think it should happen because I'm going to vote against some of your bills, as I have in the past. Just because I would become a vice chairman isn't going to change my view. If I think the bill is wrong, if I think the bill is flawed, if it can't be amended or fixed, I'm going to vote against it. And to his credit, he said, that's okay, we can work together because there's a lot of things that we can work on together. And he was right about that. In fact, even though I hold the NCAA indoor and outdoor record for voting no for the last 18 years, the truth of the matter is that 90% of the bills I support. I don't want to support all of them, but I don't want to be negative about all of them either. So I try to prioritize. And unless the bill is really bad or it has unintended consequences, I'll usually support it. So I'm happy to say in my second year as vice chairman and that committee, it's worked quite well. And yes, I have voted against my chairman and voted against the committee as well. You have to stand up. And if you believe in something, if you believe differently from me, that's fine. For example, tomorrow, we're going to be voting in the Senate on an increase in minimum wage, and I expect I'll probably be, again, the only one in Ways and Means to vote against the bill. Minimum wage is not right. It is an entry or training wage. The newsletter that I have over here details some more of our arguments about it. I'm a business owner myself. I happen to know firsthand, as I employ people, what the actual costs are. And you have to ask yourself, should government really be telling business or anyone who they can hire, what they have to pay, what the person has to do in terms of work? The business has the responsibility and the liability for everything that happens, and yet the government is making more and more rules. We have more bills that are being passed down the legislature telling you as a consumer what you can and cannot have a choice for. It's almost like living in New York City, where you can't get this size soda, and you can't get salt, and you can't get this, and you can't get that. Is that really the purview of government? I think not. I think that government should be limited. I think that government should prove, first of all, that it can do what it's supposed to do. In the field of education, we've failed miserably. We have the worst educational system in the country. In terms of debt, we have the second highest unfunded debt liability in the nation. In terms of energy, years ago it was going to be ethanol. Ethanol was a panacea. It was going to give us local industry and local jobs. Never happened. Instead, we import our ethanol from South America, Brazil primarily, and now we're changing the ethanol to biofuels. Technology changes greatly, but we don't. The legislature likes to put things in law that kind of locks us in, and again, creates monopolies and taxes and special funds that cost you and I more. In terms of other things that we look at, whether it is crime prevention, we always say that everything we do down in the Capitol is for the keiki, for the children. But is it? I think not. We allow sex assault on our children. We allow terrible things to happen, and we don't get tough with the criminals and those that violate those children. We talk a good story, we just don't do it. And in terms of agriculture, look at what we've done. In the name of the rail, we've taken some prime agricultural land in Leeward, Oahu. We're going to have more houses, more congestion, more traffic, more demands on sewers. And by the way, the sewer system, there's a break in the sewer system every 4 days. There's a water main break every single day of the year. Every day. The government has a responsibility to take care of its infrastructure first. In my humble opinion, it has done a lousy job, and yet we've spent billions of dollars. So from my standpoint, I would like to see more transparency. I'd like to see people empowered more. Every year I introduce bills for initiative, referendum, recall, and term limits. And almost every year, including this year, none of those bills have been heard. You don't even have a choice to vote on them or to go to a public hearing. So I don't want to seem pessimistic, because the fact of the matter is, the public, you, have more power than you realize, but we don't often use it. And when only 48% of the people turn out to vote, then you're allowing 24 or 25% of the people to make all the decisions. So don't give up, don't be discouraged, but get involved and hold our feet to the fire. And I'll look forward to your questions later. Thank you again for turning out tonight. Aloha.
Aloha mai kako, aloha. Thank you guys for coming out tonight. I'm dressed because I've been cold all day. I've been 7 hours in the Finance Committee, and it's very, very cold in there, in the air conditioning at the State Capitol is either all on or all off. Today it was all on. So Representative Mark and myself are probably more wrapped up than otherwise. I see this as kind of like halftime session, like in a football game, they have a break. Not that we're the entertainment, but that we're going to give you kind of a sampling, at least that's what my report for the next 5 minutes is going to be, a sample of what are some of the things that are major considerations, some of that are secondary, some of the things that may impact you directly. Some of you have my crib sheet that was handed out, Paige. By the way, did everybody know who's who and which offices? My chief of staff is Paige Alton. Paige, raise your hand so people know when they want to know what I said or didn't say. If they want to get to me, they get through to you. First of all, how are we doing in homelessness? We're not doing very well. We give it a lot of discussion. And in fact, we've passed a bill that said if you're homeless and you're sleeping on a park bench, you're going to get fined. In fact, we're going to make a criminal case out of it. If you defecate or urinate, it's a $1,000 fine. But really, the good news is that Housing First is going to come along, because the present method of getting people off of drugs or disciplined or having an addiction cleared, and then you get into housing, now they're going to give housing and try to do it in reverse. So there is some hope for that, but let's face it, and I rarely call upon the dead, except I think if Frank Fossey was alive, probably we'd have a situation solved for the homeless. Probably wouldn't be legal, but he would have done something about it. But it's something that's not only Hawaii, but it's a national problem. The other issue that we've been looking at very closely, and Sam mentioned, it's the minimum wage. The minimum wage since 2007 hasn't been raised. Even with the Chamber of Commerce and others, it looks like it's going to be passed, and inevitably it's going to be passed. Where the sticking place is that there's a bill and I guess you would call it a thought that this should be attached to the CPI. A school of thought says every time the CPI goes up, which goes up every month, the Consumer Price Index, that will make the minimum wage go up. The other sticking point is the tip credit. Now, if you're like my wife, she says, well, what is a tip credit? It's not an intuitive integration of two words that make sense. It means if you're like one of the waiters at some of these places that make $15 to $20 an hour for tips, that your employer could take off, right now the law is 25 cents, so instead of $7.25 an hour, they pay you $7 an hour. Some places have tip credits up to $2, $3, $4 an hour. The point is that those are sticking points in between what happens in the House and the Senate will probably determine, again, what is inevitable, a new minimum wage. For some of you who get my newsletter, you know I polled you last month on that, and it was 69% in support of the minimum wage and 31% against. I had that pegged at $9.50. It's either going to be $9.50 or is it, what is it, 10? 10.10 is the other figure. Another sample of what we're going to be looking at, and it's still moving, is the internet sales tax. How many of you shop on Amazon? Come on, everybody. Just about everybody at one time shops on Amazon, because in Hawaii, what my wife tells me is, hey, you get free shipping. There's a move afoot for the internet sales tax or the streamlining tax, where everything that you buy online is going to be with a GE tax, or 4.5% for Oahu and 4% for the neighbor islands. I'm not sure it's going to pass this time. There's movement in the federal Capitol for the Marketplace Fairness Act, which it's called. But it's where, if they don't pass it there are a number of states that are trying to move for the passage of this. I personally think it's not time yet, and I don't really like the reasons why they say that it should be passed, i.e. your taxes should be raised on everything that you buy. Is because they say that it's a brick and mortar versus those people on the internet. And let's face it, everybody who's in business today who's not on the internet is really behind. So to me, it's an even playing field, that if you have a company like Price Busters and you went out of business, and somebody the other day blamed the exit of Price Busters because they didn't have, because it was unfair that people were on the internet doing against them. Well, they didn't have internet presence. So any company that doesn't have internet presence today, that can sell anywhere all over the world, is not really keeping up with times. So that new tax, I'm definitely against. And if you have a different position, if you live in District 17, I polled you on this one, there's an 82% against the internet sales tax with 18% for it. I'm not saying that to protect myself or to keep you from discouraging that you want that tax, but that's one of the issues that we're facing with. Recreational marijuana. We've had probably 16 bills that were introduced. There's a couple of them still alive. Legalizing personal use and then providing each county with the power to establish a, quote, compassionate center. Personally, I think we should wait till Colorado does its recreational marijuana implementation and measurement. It's a new ball game. Some of the things that we're stepping into, I'm not sure are better for the community. I know the chief of police on the Big Island personally told me outside of a hearing that they have more DUIs that are actually under drugs than they have under alcohol. And, you know, heretofore it's always been alcohol has been the difficult thing. But in this case, where marijuana proliferates, it's a real hazard to driving. The poll that was put out before, it was 56% opposing it, recreational marijuana, and 44% for. So it's a little bit closer in the configuration. How many have solar panels on your roof? PV. Okay, you got in before the clampdown, which went from 35% down to 20. And if you look at the lights here at beautiful Kaiser High School, we only have 4% of our electricity coming out of PV. But we've got some incentives that people are waiting for, and the federal incentive is going to go after this 2016. But the difficulty is we have some bills that we have to goose Hawaiian Electric to do the connectivity. Some people have bought PV, and they actually haven't been hooked up yet. So that bill is something the legislature is very intent upon following up and following through with. As Paige will let you know, the mantra in my office is solar on every roof. Solar on every roof. If we're going to be the leaders of the solar energy, we got to go beyond 4%. I say it's often like the one-eyed leading the blind. We can do much better, and we have to get Hawaiian Electric to get on with the promotion of this and the hooking up of those that are waiting for it and promoting as much solar energy as possible. I use the analogy that if you remember IBM back in the 70s and 80s was king with the mainframe, and then in the early 80s the PC came out. If we're going to really get to off of dependence on oil, we got to get rid of this mainframe model. That's the dinosaur. That's the existing Hawaiian Electric. That's the existing grid model for the United States. We have to go to the PC, the microgrids, the grids that you and I all have on our roof. And on raining days, we then call upon Hawaiian Electric as a supplemental. It's just reversing the priorities that we have right now. In terms of education, we have in fact, I hope your feedback will be plentiful on this, because we have a salary cap that's going to move from $150,000 to $250,000 for the superintendent of schools. I've said publicly, you know, I could pay her $1 million if she could get us #1 in the educational field. Right now we're about, Sam, where are we? 43rd, 44th?
That's being generous.
40, we're in the 40s. So it's, no, we're not 49, we're not that bad. But it's where, should there be a cap? And I'm saying if this does pass, Mark, I'll let you nuance that when you come up. If there is going to be a $250,000 cap, it should be with performance measures. And Paige in my office has been trying to get, well, what are the performance measures in Mrs. Matayoshi's contract now? And because it's private, we can't get it, even if we wanted to bifurcate it. It looks like we got to be like the media, Helen Alton, and go through the Freedom of Information Act if we have to, if we can't get it openly. So that is an issue that's moving along, and one of the things that we have to pay very, very close attention to. Lastly, GMO. How many of you want labeled products, GMO? How many of you go to Whole Foods? Okay, it's 85%. It's really a very popular thing. In the poll that I took, GMO was 84% for it and 16% against it. Again, these are things that probably inevitably are going to evolve. It's not an easy thing to do labeling. Hawaii is a very small market, and if you're a company and then you're going to label just for Hawaii, you're probably going to have to think twice to see what the cost may be to do that. And the other thing is the Department of Health doesn't know how to actually measure the GMO content, how to really know expertise-wise what are the things that are happening with GMO. Lastly, and my time is up, the Affordable Care Act. It's going to impact all of us in ways that we've heard about, and there's so many moving parts. I only want to share one with you, and that is the interconnector, or the connector, of which was $205 million to set up and $15 million per year to run after the federal grant runs out in 2016. Right now, we have about half of that money committed. A large share of that money is just to set up a website to get the, quote, 100,000 who are uninsured in Hawaii. But we've learned that 50,000 of those are in Medicare, so we got to find 50,000 people, and it's going to take $15 million per year to find that. We don't have that as a budget item, and that's going to be in perpetuity unless something creative is done. The point is, it's coming. We're not even sure that the exemption that Hawaii has is solid, the way that we were exempted from the Affordable Care Act, because we already have the Prepaid Act for decades. So it's a bit of an uncertainty, but the certain thing is that costs are going to go up. Lastly, this is an election year. We shouldn't be doing things too controversial, but you never know what happens after until the gavel goes down. You never know what can happen, because nothing that is dead that we haven't even talked about can come back alive. And you've all have heard of gut and replacement. That is frowned upon, but it still lives. So until between now and May 2nd, another 2 months, basically, May 2nd is when we see a DA. We are open for input. So tonight these are some of the issues that each of us are speaking about, and each of us seek your input for. So thank you, and I look forward to your questions. Aloha.
Aloha, everybody. My name is Mark Hashem. I'm actually Representative Ward's neighbor. I represent District 18. My district goes from Hawaii Costco out to Kahala Zippy. So I go out that way. And I was recently appointed to the chair of housing. So majority of the issues that I work on are housing related. And the big thing that Hawaii is moving for now for the homeless, as Representative Ward touched on, is the housing first issue. And what that does is basically takes people, homeless people, puts them into housing first, and then they bring in all the services and try to work with the person that way. It might seem quite odd in the beginning. This is actually a program that was implemented by Utah, and it's very successful there because a lot of the homeless are very high users of our emergency rooms. They also go in and out of prisons, and they're very intensive users on on the state's infrastructure. When you factor in, it costs about $40,000 per year to house one inmate in prison. It's cheaper to just provide that person with an apartment of $15,000 a year. So that's kind of the concept of how this program is moving. So if you have any questions from here on in, I'll be up here for any questions, and feel free to ask me anything you want. Okay. Oh, by the way, I was saying, Hawaii is ranked number 2 for education if you come from the bottom up.
So what I'm going to suggest is that the 4 of us just stand up here because for the question and answer, because your questions may be to any one of us, but if we took turns with the questions, and sometimes the people at the front take all the time, and you don't have time for people at the end. So why don't you guys stand up? And then, as I said, we'll repeat the question. If you have a question for any one of us, let us know at the beginning of your question, or if you have a question for all of us. And I stopped wearing a watch, so if somebody, yeah, you can help me with keeping the time.
Okay.
Then we'll want to end in time for the informal.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
like my eyes are that good? Okay, so any questions?
I was just wondering, you know, I support solar, but I'm just wondering, I'm down the line when all of these units become, they wear off these lives, what happens? Is there a plan for disposing, replacing them, recycling them?
Okay, so the question is, while she supports solar, what happens with the solar panels and the solar production facility at the end of their lifespan? And it's a good question because there's a lot of details to be worked out on opening up large lands for solar production. The way the bill deals with it is that the panels and everything would have to be removed after 20 years at the end of their lifespan. But I know it's difficult to the bill doesn't talk about who's responsible for enforcing that or what the consequences are if the panels are not removed. So there are a lot of significant questions.
It's a good question from a number of ways also, because we're told constantly that solar energy is free, and there is no such thing as free energy, whether it's solar or biotech or anything else. There are always costs, and the replacement costs, actually the 20-year period is really optimistic, and it depends on the kinds of panels. Not all panels are the same. Not all quality controls or insulation are the same. So we're just getting into it now, and we're not getting to a situation where we have large-scale replacement, but it will be costly, and it's something that most of these bills have not really provided for. So it's a good question, and we're going to watch it. Just like, as was said, and some of you may have been involved with Hawaiian Electric. Hawaiian Electric still has the ability to say no. And as a matter of fact, they have said no to solar panels, PV systems. They did it unilaterally. They changed their own rules back in September of last year and caught homeowners and contractors unaware. So there still is a lot of work to be done, whether it's the talk of what the legislature does or whatever it does. But if you get involved, make sure you read and understand your contract first before you put out a large sum of money.
I am very bullish on technology, and I think 20 years is going to be extended to where they're going to be longer than that. I see the biggest disposal issue are the batteries, and that's where the microgrid comes in. The battery technology has been a little bit slower than a lot of other communications technology, but it's coming along to where your solar and your battery system can do microgrids. And it's probably a function of the way that some of the bills are coming in now. If you buy a computer or you buy an electronic thing that's going to create electronic waste, you're going to have to put a deposit. And I think that's part of the way that they're going to resolve the issue of the waste, and they'll have specific waste areas for those kinds of multiple mineral and poisonous and otherwise elements that are going to be very, very polluting in the future. But my sense is the technology is going to come to where the free energy is going to be an empowering thing for people rather than paying so much for it as it is now. It's going to be much more affordable, and you're going to be much more in control of it.
Any other?
How can the legislature assist farmers to get back into producing food for us to eat instead of having concrete and houses put on our beautiful farm ground out there in the middle of our island?
Do you want to take this since you missed the last one?
How does the legislator?
How can the legislature do
Try to
anything
repeat the
to
question.
encourage them to get back into the farming business and supply us with food instead of depending on the ships?
Okay, the question is, how can the legislature help the farmers supply food instead of importing food?
Get back
Right.
in the farming business instead of allowing your land, our beautiful farm ground out there to be covered up with concrete and asphalt.
Okay, I agree with you. The problem with, well, not the problem.
I was asking a
Okay.
question. I didn't make a statement.
No, I agree with, the legislature has done a lot. We passed in 2011, we finally passed IAL, the Important Agriculture Land Designation. That was set in place in the Constitutional Convention, and it was supposed to be done, and we finally passed it when I got in. I was the vice chair of agriculture at that time, and what it does is it has the large landowners put in agriculture land in perpetuity as agriculture. So we finally pushed that through. There's a lot of other incentives that the legislature has done, the Gabbard estates that are purchasing 1,500 acres of land out in the Wahiawa area.
The government bought it?
Yes.
What
And
happened to it?
they're currently working on leases to get farmers back into land. One of the big problems that was happening with farmers, it was very difficult for them to secure long-term leases. And because of that, it's hard to put in infrastructure. If you only have a year-to-year lease or a 5-year lease, then you cannot, no bank will lend to you, so you don't have this long-term commitment on the property. So with the state buying the property, they secured long-term leases for these farmers, and they can put in infrastructure. And now what the legislature is doing is we're looking to, well, actually the Senate is doing this, right? Yeah, they're looking in the Wahiawa area, they're putting in like a co-op. So the food processing area will be there. It's the old Doe Cannery, site, and where is that?
It's in Wahiawa. It's
Yeah.
like the Whitmore Village.
Yeah, Whitmore Village, that's what it is.
So there has been land purchased by the state with the help of the Legacy Land Fund, also Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and the city clean water funds coming together, and also Trust for Public Land. And they've purchased some land out in Kunia, also taking a look at some of the dole lands that are on the market, and trying to coordinate through the Department of Agriculture and ADC with the farmers so that they'll share production facilities and then be able to, bring things from the fields into that area. And as Mark said, there's a number of incentives that have passed the legislature. But I think another real problem that we have is we can't purchase all the agricultural lands, and there's private agricultural lands, much of which is fallow, where it's not in use, or where the landowner is letting farmers on it on very, very short-term leases, so they can't invest money in greenhouses and other types of infrastructure to increase their production. And to me, one of the things that we can do is to make sure that we actually apply our land use laws, because our land use laws are pretty good, but the problem is there's a lot of people that are waiting for development market values, and when you look on the real estate prices, a lot of these ag lands, when they're for sale, they're set for sale and being marketed as for their potential for development. And I think that's where government really has to say no to many of these developments, to send a very strong signal to the market that ag lands are for ag production.
The question is, where have all the farmers gone? The fact is, the farming profession, we've got one in the audience here.
I have one question.
But I'm going to respond. Oh, it's the same question.
It doesn't answer the question. One of the problems that I see, take even the farmland in the back here, is there any way that the legislature could do something similar to what they did to Kamehameha in Kahala, where they condemned certain property, they made them sell the leasehold land. This property back here, several acres back here, it is gone pretty much except for Osuka down there at the corner. Nobody's really doing much.
Okay, and that's part of what my answer is. And
They only have 11 years left. Well, go ahead.
it's the most difficult profession to get into. Not only because of the leases they talked about, the cost of water, cost of electricity, the cost of labor, the cost of fertilizer, and then the market that is so small. To compete with the California agricultural mothership, if you will, that feeds basically America. And remember, 1% of the labor force feeds America. And we have now a mantra in the state for food security. And some of the things that were mentioned earlier is to promote food security, but when you import 80 to 85% of everything that you consume, that is really a tall order. Not that we can't do better, but to say that we're going to get our kids into the young man here with I was going to say with the broken wrist or with the wrist from arm wrestling or whatever he's been doing, to get into agriculture, probably his mother's not going to make him into a farmer. In fact, I would say that those who have gone to the taro, those who, mostly with Native Hawaiian backgrounds, those who are raising taro, they are having a problem surviving. The biggest taro raiser is in Kauai. And the representative of Kauai shares with us that, hey, they're basically making themselves sustain where they are. So the problem is, if we're going to build a farming community, we got to have much more political, we got to put more money into it, and what we've done so far is giving it mantras and rhetoric, but we haven't put our money into where you want to buy out land, that's going to cost a lot of money for the ag division to be able to do that. So it's a difficult, unending thing, but right now, the best thing that's being used for the old ag lands, it's not the best thing, but what's being used, they're growing weeds and growing houses. And that's not the best use.
My question is that right here in Illinois Valley, there is land that is zoned agriculture in the city, but the state recognizes it as urban. What can we do to make the state market as ag land as well?
Marion's mentioning one of the incongruities of use that's categorized by the city and by the state, and they're inconsistent. I think we can do the same thing that we did with the Mackay lands of Kaiwi. And that's basically with the planning and the governor's office, we basically turned those ag lands in. That's really what should be done with Kamilunui Valley.
I can. You know who's right there? A lot of preservation, and she's working with groups.
Because we're touching it?
Level, you have to have the willingness at the state level to change the land use designation from urban to conservation or ag. But get ready for battle, because if the landowner doesn't like it, they're going to fight, because it's pretty much amazing. You've got to establish a relationship with the landowner in the new schools. You got to help the farmers do better with what they have.
Yeah.
That's what really needs to happen. The land there is creating land, there's some new farmers in there, there's some exciting things you'll hear about, but really, need to ramp up productivity, and that valley needs to be branded for something more than just a great place for the country.
If you're listening to us on Olelo, we've just had a technical glitch. We didn't get a microphone for that to be picked up efficiently. But, okay, that's the reality. And remember, the owners of that land are going to take it back in 2025. So that land actually is not even going to be farming, depending on what they do, but it's still in agricultural intention.
Community members have asked them in schools if we can do an agricultural easement. Give them a bunch of money and basically buy the development rights. We haven't gotten okay, we haven't gotten enough. We will continuously ask.
Maxine.
We need that. That's what really needs to happen. Let the native schools keep the land, but put an agricultural easement on it to protect it from recruiting. And it would be for growing food, not for anything. Or it could be both.
Michael, City Council, you're listening to that, right? Go ahead.
At the federal level, they have the Congressional Budget Office, who seems to offend both sides of the aisle. what do we have here when they're figuring out the cost of a bill? Exactly who is giving you those figures and deciding the bottom line on it?
Custom made.
The question is, we have a Congressional Budget Office, which is independent, that develops figures and costs. For example, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, came out last week with a statement that if the minimum wage is raised federally, that there will be a loss of 500,000 jobs. We have no comparable agency in the state. Usually when a bill comes before the House Finance Committee or Senate Ways and Means, it will be the tax department that comes forward and talks about what the estimated revenue loss will be. I've been introducing legislation for a number of years which is patterned after the state of Minnesota, for example, called fiscal notes, which would say that any bill that's introduced that has a fiscal implication has to talk about what the total amount is going to be of the program over the years. Because oftentimes a program is proposed and there may be a very modest appropriation the first year, $500,000, $1 million. But the overall cost of that program may be $50 million or $100 million later on. And it's something that legislators should know about and taxpayers should know about, because then and only then can you say, is that program worth it? And then you have to have oversight to make sure that it does the things that you do. So the direct answer is we don't have an agency like that. We do have the state auditor, the legislative auditor, who often will do a management audit or a financial audit or a financial and management audit, but that usually is after the case. We need something initially, like the CBO, that, as you say, offends both sides or all sides. The closest we've had to that all along for 40 years or more has been the Private Tax Foundation of Hawaii, under Lowell Kalapa, who unfortunately died in December. The Tax Foundation came and they testified, and they tweaked legislators in terms of financial implications that either we or the tax department or the supporters of a program didn't operate. So it's a good idea, and maybe we should find a way of doing it. Thank you.
Yeah, my concern is more here at home. And my neighborhood is Hawaii Fort Lock. My name is David Holzman, and I'm the president of the Fort Lock Community Association. As you drive into Fort Lock on Little Home Road, on the left, directly on the left-hand side is Coheed Elementary School. Recently, somebody asked me, why do you have all these abandoned buildings here? That school, the groundskeeping is just atrocious. I'm all in favor of recycling, but they've got this great big bin of cans right in the front yard. If I tried to do that at my house, I'd get arrested or I'd get ticketed. I think this is a problem, but there are some solutions, and it seems like nobody only talks about problems, but nobody really talks about solutions. So some of the solutions I see is, if it's budgetary, I mean, Senator Slom, you were talking about maintaining infrastructure, and you know, we go out and talk about solar, and we talk about this, and we can't maintain what we've already got. So if we can't take care of what we already have, I'm not certain why we're trying to do more, number one. Next, directly in my community, if the neighborhood would be willing to go in and clean up the school for the school, that would be one solution. Another solution is that we've got some rich people that live in our neighborhood. Our zip code is probably one of the most wealthy zip codes in the nation. And I'm sure I could go out and I could get people, and we could actually pay people to go in and clean up that school. So Kaiser here is not much better, but I mean, come on.
So again, for those on Olelo, the question from the head of the Portlock Community Association is, why does the school at Cocoa Head Elementary look so run down, the grounds run down, and then the recycling out front, is, I guess, it's an eyesore and possibly some other issues relating to it. First of all, I want to thank you for recognizing that the community can lend a hand there. And that school is actually in my Senate district, I think, and also in Jean's House district. And we would be delighted to work with you as the head of the community association and the school to try and set up some type of partnership between the community and the school. My daughters grew up, I raised them in Aikahi. I went to Aikahi Elementary, and the community was very instrumental there in building a new playground. When the old playgrounds, you may remember, like 10, 15 years ago, a bunch of playgrounds were torn down because of liability concerns. And so we got together, worked with the school, and built, with our physical labor and volunteer donations from construction crews, a new playground, and the school welcomes that kind of support. So we would be delighted to work with you and the principal at the elementary school to try and set up some type of community partnership to help them. I think as far as abandoned buildings go, what we're finding, because the population is kind of shifting, so areas like this neighborhood, which is a more established, older neighborhood, had larger populations of younger kids, and the schools were built for that size. Now a lot of the families with the younger kids have moved out into other areas, and you have schools like in Melilani that are running on a multi-track system, or in the Eva area. So you may have some facilities here at your elementary school that are underutilized, but again, that partnership would be helpful.
Such district here.
Yeah.
It looks abandoned.
That it looks abandoned. I know, I've only been in the legislature a couple years. These guys could tell you more, but the legislature has put in a significant amount of money at the backlog of repair and maintenance for the DOE, and they have significantly reduced that over the last 10 years. But there's a lot, there's a lot more to go, because what happens is when you reduce the backlog, when you do that over 10 years, the stuff that wasn't in the backlog now becomes backlogged.
Why are we talking about all this other stuff when you can't take care of what you already got?
The solar facilities that we were talking about are not state facilities. They're private. They're private development, and that's what we were talking about. They have come to the legislature to change the state land use law, but
Land for farmers, give them 20 acres, perfect. They can't even send their kids to college with 20 acres.
okay, I'm not sure what was meaning by that.
First of all, Mr. Olsman, thank you for keeping the bar, raising the bar high, and keeping the aesthetics of our community high. One of the admirable facts about Hawaii Kai is that it maintains itself beautifully. It's the first planned community in the entire state. But sometimes it slips. Sometimes things do get out of hand, and we appreciate you're willing not only to point it out, but to say, hey, we can pull ourselves up and we can do this. And I know we have not been successful, but there are attempts to bring the issue to their attention and to even do cost sharing. But right now, the way that I think the system is stovepiped, something as creative and innovative and entrepreneurial as what you're speaking has a difficult process of getting through and into the system and having them understand. But don't give up on ways of thinking outside of the box. And I know there's many ways that things can be improved without waiting for the bureaucracy. Case in point, you all have seen the bathroom at the Maunalua Bay. How many years has it taken the city and county to fix the restroom, and it's still not fixed? 3 years and a half to fix a restroom, a toilet. And we still haven't done it. But, and by the way, just to make it straight, the 2010 Census Bureau said the zip code with the most income is 96821. Representative Hashem. However, the zip code with the most education, the zip code with the most education is 96825. And that's why keeping us accountable on all your hard questions is something that we aspire to and are continually challenged by. So I know that doesn't satisfy you, but we're going to work together and we're going to do it.
Can I just add a little bit to that? Because I'm sure most of you are really tired of hearing people talk about things and not do things. And that's what it really comes down to. A couple of years ago, Representative Ward and I had a town meeting when they were going to close Cocoa Head and Kamiliwiki schools. DOE was going to do that, even though they're two of the top performing schools on the island and in the state. But look, here's the thing, really. I've been involved in other schools and cleanups over the years, and guess what happens? If you organize families, it doesn't matter whether it's a wealthy neighborhood or a not so wealthy neighborhood. People invest themselves in their school. It has a partnership automatically with the people that live there, the parents, the businesses, and everything else. That's why the school is a magnet for all kinds of activities. But people have organized cleanups before, and you know what happened? They ran into trouble. With who? With the unions. Because the unions are saying, you're doing our job, or you're making us look bad. The fact that they don't do a good job in many cases, that's beside the point. So just like when I talk about the keiki, the object is not for the keiki, the object is not for the schools, the object is to keep this bureaucratic nightmare together, spend a lot of money, do a lot of talking, and at the end of the day, not make the changes. We can make those changes, we can do those things, but first of all, we have to understand that it's going to come from citizens. It's not going to come from the legislature. Believe me, it's not going to come from government. Government has stepped up to the plate and struck out time and time again. So instead of getting frustrated, though, what you do is you get people together. You know, the playground right next to Cocoa Head School, that was done privately, basically. And if you look around this area, too, a lot of the playgrounds were organized. They had asked for the legislature, they asked the DOE to do things they weren't done, so they got together and did them themselves. It's really sad, the amount of money that the taxpayers pay for education and for repairs and for all this. We had a mayor, briefly, who ran on a platform of, do we need it? Can we afford it? Can we maintain it? When he got into office, he kept that promise for about 2 months. If he would have kept that promise, and if we use that as a mantra for all of us, that's a really good thing. But you have to know, politicians will turn out to take a oh-oh stick and dig some dirt, or to cut a miley for something new, but they're not there for a repair and maintenance. And that's the real heart of any project. And when you're building something, you should have a sinking fund to take care of that maintenance automatically, so you don't let it get in disrepair. Because when it does, not only the value goes down, but also it's harder to repair later on the more that you let it go. But I do echo what Representative Ward said. Don't give up on it. But on the other hand, seek out those people that will do things and don't just talk about them.
Behind Rachel. In the beginning, we wanted to have people come up forward, and we thought that would be difficult.
Good evening. It's nice to see you, Jean. Sam. There is a bill going through the legislature regarding the possession or selling of ivory, of any type of ivory product. And its merits are good because we need to save our elephants, and you've signed off on House Bill 2183. This is very broad, and it also will have an impact on Hawaiians. It has an impact on the Inuit, Alaskan Eskimo carving walrus ivory, because the bill lists African elephants, walrus, whale, narwhal, hippopotamus, which is not an endangered species. We had a jewelry store in Hawaii called Ming's from 1941 approximately to 1999. Ming's Jewelry sold elephant ivory carved and done legally, which is highly collectible in our market. And if you were to make it illegal to possess ivory as a collection and to liquidate it or to sell it to another collector, we would be committing a misdemeanor for the first offense and a Class C felony for the second offense. As a gemologist and an appraiser, this makes it very difficult for someone to pass on a Leni Palaoa from Hawaiian history. It makes it difficult to pass along the grandmother's Buddha that she came with when she moved to Hawaii in the 20s to work in the pineapple field. There is ivory that is donated to museums, but you would have difficulty in getting an appraisal and have that family member donate their collection of ivory. The Bishop Museum may not want it because you've had a law voted in to ban all ivory sales or possession with even the slightest intent of selling. This is a piece of Hawaiian history and finding paradise that collectors across the mainland. And this ivory was legally procured through Ming's, the Sultan Company, Shirokia, and we have all abided by that. And there were people at the collector's show that were taking pictures and scared the vendors. I went there and I made a petition and went to the legislature and testified. I'm all for saving the African elephant. You left out the Asian elephant in this bill. But if this is going to be enforced, it's actually the federal government at the border that is to intercept any product, animal, ivory, walrus, whatever it is, at the border and the post office. It is not up to the state legislature, and I think you need to take care of it the right way.
Thank you. So I think the question was for you because it was related to a bill that you may have signed, but what I'm going to ask is if he could talk with you during the one-on-one period. We are getting to the close of the Q&A for everybody, so I'm just going to ask whether anybody has one final burning general question that we can respond to, and we will. Elizabeth?
What's the name of the agency that's in charge of developing Kaka'ako?
The Hawaii Community Development Authority, or HCDA, is in charge of Kaka'ako.
So I'm just beside myself that agency has free rein to sidestep all the permitting process and everything else at the county level. I was talking to somebody at the county, and I think now that there may be movement to allow the head of the Department of Planning and Permitting to serve on that board. But I just cannot understand how at the state level we can allow that to be the case. All those people are appointed by the governor. Nobody there is really with credentials in planning, and your impact will in a huge way county infrastructure, and nobody is accountable for that.
Okay, so let me just repeat this again. Yeah, for Olelo, the question is, what's going on with the Hawaii Community Development Authority? There seems to, first of all, they're exempt from all this county zoning. The board is appointed by the governor, and people are very upset about some of the decisions that they've been making recently about development. Mark, you haven't had a chance to talk recently. Do you want to talk about the House side bills? And then Sam can talk about the Senate side.
But I'll give you the history on that. I'm not going to go into if it's right or wrong, and I might be wrong about my history. I wasn't around. It was back, from my understanding, it was started between the fight between, who's that, Fosse and Ariyoshi. And that's where HCDA started. Ariyoshi wanted to redevelop Kaka'ako. Fosse blocked him, right? So to get around Fosse, Ariyoshi put in HCDA and pushed that through. And so that's how HCDA was created. Since the creation of HCDA, the state has put in over about $250 million into that, just into Kaka'ako alone, just to handle the sewer, the infrastructure, everything underneath the ground, was a large part done by the state in the late 90s, I want to say. So there is a lot of infrastructure already there, and there's the planning for Kaka'ako, for the density of Kaka'ako, has been going on for years, for a long time. The only reason why it's coming to light now is because the economy is pushed to the point where now everybody's starting to develop there. So, and that's the history behind it, and that's why everything is going forward. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I just think that the county should be more active in the planning of that area. That's all. Thank you.
Well, I seen the overall plan, and it's pretty impressive. So, I mean, you should see it. It's going to be very different.
And now for the rest of the story, because I was there at the birth of HCDA in the late 70s and early 80s. And I want to tell you, our governor, who we've had a relationship for more than 50 years, I think we've only agreed on one thing in that 50-year span, and that was that we were both opposed to the creation of HCDA. And we said at the time, and we've said since, that because it's not part of the city and it's not part of the state, we've had some poor leadership in the past that basically told you, go fly a kite. I had a presence in HCDA for maybe 20 years, and they were never very friendly. And in terms of now, the executive director, Mr. Tony Ching, who is a nice guy, and feels that he's doing a good job, but if you go to a hearing, you find out that you're not listened to, and that there's not as much transparency as there should be. And that is the real key issue, how the process works for people to testify, and if, in fact, as you say correctly, Elizabeth, since the governor now appoints everybody on the authority, and I always have a problem when some agency is called authority, you know, because that kind of sets the stage. But they don't seem to listen. They don't modify their plans very much. And while it's true, as Representative Hashem said, everybody is coming down on Kaka'ako. Now look, Kaka'ako was the primary urban light industrial area. If you wanted to fix something or get something you couldn't get anywhere else, you didn't go to Amazon.com, you went to Kaka'ako. And we've pushed all those people out. And now we're in danger of making it, you know, tremendously high-rise. You have to balance that, though, with landowners, whether it's Kamehameha Estates, whether it's OHA, if they've already been granted a master plan approval. That's what Howard Hughes is upset about right now. But there's got to be a change in the way that it works. There's got to be more empowerment by citizens. So some of us down the legislature, we actually want to do that, and hopefully we can do some of that this year. Thanks, Elizabeth.
So at this point, we'll end the Q&A, but I have the time for the one-on-one because I know some of you have some questions, but I want to echo the thanks for everybody coming out tonight and giving us their valuable time, and I definitely want to speak to the head of the Portlock Association about working with him with the schools. So mahalo.